Okay, everybody, welcome to the second book in our Sunday book review series. So welcome back. If you didn't see the first one, I'll link to it below. We talked about a book from Bill Dorrance and everything that he did. In fact, I think I have it right here. I do. So check out this one in the other review in the link below. Okay, but today we're talking about a completely different book. We've got a different concept. In that one, we're talking about horsemanship and feel. In this one, we're talking about medical stuff. Primarily, we're talking about hooves. As you know, the old saying, very old saying, and getting quite cliche, no hoof, no horse. So, couldn't be more true though. If the hooves on your horse are no good, they're going to be lame, outright lame. At the very most, I suppose. And at the very least, they're going to be sore and uncomfortable, and they're not going to ride as well. And so you're going to wonder why. You're going to wonder what's wrong with your horse. Is it a body thing? Is it a general health thing? Or is it a hoof thing? And I would say out of my experience and out of the people that I talk to, 90% of the time, it has something to do with the hooves. So in such a case, this book here, Care and Rehabilitation of the Equine Foot, is definitely something to have in your library. I can't recommend it enough. I've had this book for a very long time, years. I've read it over and over. I've looked through different sections to try to understand everything that these authors have put together. The main author of this is Pete Ramey. He, from my understanding, he organized the putting together of this book so that it wouldn't be just about what he does, which is trimming, but he knows a few people, or he knew a few people that know a lot about the science behind what's going on with the feet, with the health of the horse, with the mind, and everybody contributed to make this book that much better, because you can't understand how to deal with the hoof without understanding whether or not something else is going wrong too. It might not just be the trim, it might not be just pathology, it might not be something in the skeletal structure, it could be something completely different like the diet. And so those things are covered in here as well. So let's talk about this a little bit. Actually, we should talk a little bit about Pete Ramey. If you haven't heard of him by now, you should go look him up if you're interested in hooves. He is a professional. He's been in the industry for quite a while, quite a long time. He's put out DVDs. He's got this book. He's got a group on Facebook that he actively contributes to and is actively involved in. And he also has a website that he put up a whole bunch of articles before, and he is now, at the time of this video, is redoing to make sure that the information he has up there is up to date. Now, this book is 7 years old. It was printed in 2011, but it doesn't mean that the information in here is out of date. I think some of it can be updated for sure. So that's what Pete does on his website, and he makes sure that people know that within his group. But you wouldn't find that in the book, other than I think he does show, if you want more information or if you want up-to-date information, go check out the website. But this book here is thick. It's got a lot of pages. I think 440 plus the index, kind of thing. And it's a big read. The first half of the book, let's see, I think up until here, if you can see that, this half is all science. This half is the theory that complements the science. So the theory and trimming practices and all of the science behind this stuff. So if you can understand more of this stuff, and then you get the concepts of this stuff, you can actually come up with your own ideas and modifications to fit what you feel are your needs, because not every trimmer is the same. There are a few, probably 4 or 5 major trimming styles out there, and each one sort of has similarities, and some are almost the same. But some are very different too. So that's something that you might need to figure out based on, say, the first half of where it talks about science. Provable things, not anecdotal or experience-based, but provable items. Now, a couple of the other authors I want to talk about really quickly so that there is credibility put towards this book, so you'll understand through my experience, through reading particular articles, going to websites. I've done a lot of research myself, so I'm familiar with each one of these people. The first one to bring up is Dr. Robert Bowker. I've met him in person, actually, and he is a pretty smart guy. He does a lot of research into more of the microscopic level, the vascular portion of the foot. And I think I tagged a page. I mean, it gets quite detailed, and hopefully you'll be able to see this a little bit. But we get into where he's starting to talk about how does the blood flow in the foot? Why does it flow that way? How does the cellular structure assist in removing the bad stuff, bringing in the good stuff? How does that hoof heal itself? And how can we assist it? Is sort of the things to be getting from these chapters. He's done a couple chapters for sure, and I think he helps out with a few with Pete. So the table of contents is just, I mean, it's just rich with information. There's 31 chapters in here, all very, very, very useful. The other couple of people I want to talk about quickly, there's Dr. Eleanor Kellon, who does a lot of talking about diet. If you're one of those horse people that loves to get into the nutritional aspects, hay and minerals and vitamins and all those things on how to make your horse feel better, how to make them respond better, grow a better coat, have better feet, stuff like that. Yeah, lots of good information in here. Talks about metabolic laminitis, if you know what that is. It's the metabolism of the horse that may be causing laminitic episodes through high sugars in hays and stuff like that. So you'll want to look at that. And then there's Dr. Kerry Ridgway. He's passed away, so he's not going to be contributing any further, unfortunately. But he did a lot of good research, also into nutrition. But in this book, he covers equine ulcers. And the reason these chapters are in here for this book about hooves and rehab is because things like ulcers and poor nutrition, bad diet, can all be traumatic episodes or things for the horse that can cause laminitis, founder. And if you don't know what those two things are, I recommend you look them up. But essentially the whole hoof, just sort of like diabetes things, in the nails of people who have diabetes, you end up getting brittle, cracking nails, weak nails, nails that kind of come off. So the same things can happen to the hooves of horses when they have poor diet and their body can't handle these things. So if your horse has ulcers, which is very, very common, unfortunately, they're even more compromised. They're even more unhealthy and don't have the ability to deal with repairs that are needed. So it's very, very, very important to solve all of these problems, all these other problems, and why they happen, which goes back to Robert Bowker's studies of how nutrition and blood flow can assist no matter what you do. You may be trimming in whatever way, but unless you solve these ulcers and nutrition problems and environment problems, you could trim all you want. The horse's body is never going to be able to handle fixing itself properly to grow strong, healthy hooves, which is then what comes into the rehabilitation part of this, which is actually what got me into this business so much. It's because we had one of our own horses that really needed help, and it was a very difficult case. This book was on my desk all the time. I was constantly looking at it, trying to understand what was going on, trying to make changes and grow down a more proper, healthy foot. And the other part of it is this can give you some pathways. If we sort of look through, I've made a couple of points here that I wanted to show you. Equine ulcers we've covered. Let's take that out. Talking about hay and the hay analysis. Again, nutrition. We get into the laminitis part. Why does it happen? How do we deal with it? Very important information. But more than that, you start to understand, if you can read, if you've never been in this part, if you've never done rehab, you've never worried about hooves, you've never wondered any of these things, and you're kind of thinking, hey, I wonder, maybe I want to know something. This gave me an understanding of the pathways that I could take to get to where I wanted to be. And one of those things actually was x-rays. Now, if you've never seen x-rays of hooves, they're kind of difficult. I mean, even now when I look at x-rays of hooves, I think, what is that? Is that healthy? How do you know? I mean, what are the measurements supposed to be? Is there supposed to be that shape there? And why is it, black or gray or white? And so the x-rays, when we did them, were very, very important to understand whether or not the hoof was rehabilitatable or not. How far along in its pathologies is it or not? Maybe it's perfectly healthy and just needs a good trim. But x-rays were a really, really important tool. And I never would have known about taking x-rays unless I'd read the book and thought, oh, wow, I can actually go get x-rays. So call up the vet, and your vet, if you have a good vet that has an x-ray machine, they bring it down, do some x-rays, check things out, which can be really, really helpful if you don't know or aren't familiar with or not used to reading the outside of the hoof. And I'll talk a lot more about hooves another time, but this book is sort of the gateway into that to give you an idea, what else can you do? How can you solve problems that you're seeing? And are you seeing any problems? Because there's a lot of cases where you just have no idea if you're even looking at a problem or not. So not knowing what you not know and then knowing what you don't know can help you figuring out what you want to know based on what you don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. The second half of this book, I can't say enough about. Pete has put out a lot of information out to the public. Some would say he gives away all of his secrets, kind of thing. And I think that's great if he does that. I think we're just like that here as well. It's a learning barn. That's why we're in the learning studio and constantly trying to put out information as well. Because the more that's out there as our collective, the better, because we're all going to kind of grow. And that's a really good thing. The other thing I just wanted to quickly point out is in the beginning, if I say words like the medial and the lateral and the dorsal, aspect of hooves and stuff like that, in the beginning I found it very, very confusing myself. And I thought, why don't we just use the top and the side and the inside or whatever? But there are medical terms that just make a lot of sense and are used universally for these kinds of things. And so right in the beginning, there's a whole section. I don't even know if you can see that, but there's a whole section in there that allows you to understand and study, so you become more familiar. So when you're reading some of these things, you won't just sort of nod off and call it bedtime reading instead of Sunday reading. So the second part of this book, I would call it a second part because the first part is more medical, more science, and then we get to Pete's theories and practices and some of his science that comes along with it as well on how to trim hooves, what to look for, what are some common problems, whether they're underrun heels, long toes. We talk about thrush a lot, embedded bars, flat soles, high-low syndrome. You've probably heard of navicular syndrome if you've been in the horse world at all. Navicular is a very common sort of statement for problems that are happening on the back of the foot. And so all of these things are in here. And there's some really, really interesting pictures on where he's taken some live feet and he's trimmed one half, or he's shown the before and afters, or even when you grab a cadaver and you start just sort of taking that hoof apart and seeing how it's built and seeing the cross sections. And I won't show you any pictures on here just in case any of you are squeamish. There are some pictures in here of dissections that may oh, you know, you might look at it and think, wow, that's kind of gross. But it's very, very important to understand. And I recommend to everybody out there, and this book is one of those books that encouraged me to get into doing dissections, because you can find out so much more when you go to look at a hoof somewhere and you think, I think I know what's going on in there, because you can picture what's going on inside, or what should be going on inside the hoof. And so this book here, for me at least, gave me that insight and gave me the desire to go look further, so I would have even more insight later on when I really, really need to know, like now when I'm trimming every day. Let's see, what further can I say about this? There's, in the back end of this, because we are talking about rehab, hoof care, the back of this book are, because you know how some books, they just talk about what could be going wrong, how to see it, maybe how to fix it a little bit. But Pete goes a little bit further and he says, look, this is how you're going to want to try to rehab these cases. And he has all kinds of pictures in here of how to use hoof boots, pads, how to modify these things to fit different horses. Because we had a case where a hoof boot, a proper hoof boot, wouldn't fit at all. It wouldn't fit properly. We had to make modifications. We had no idea how really to do that. But his tips and tricks in here that he's used throughout his time of doing trimming really, really helped. Very, very practical, down-to-earth advice in here. How to use, like I said, how to use hoof boots, tests that you can do. We started doing slow motion video to see if we could see if a horse is landing flat, if a horse is landing toe first, if a horse is landing heel first. And then, of course, the science in the beginning of the book helps us understand, well, what happens when these things happen. So then Pete's got ways of figuring out, well, how can you make it so that, they do land properly? So the book is just full of information right from A to Z, essentially, where you've got the beginning science, all the science of how the hoof and the body works, the science of the nutrition, the science of the problems that could come from poor nutrition or poor environments, and then you get on to all the Pete stuff and the accompanying material with that, pictures and everything, of how to deal with hoof problems and then to rehab them. And hopefully you'll then be able to recognize they're getting better. So, I don't know, maybe I've done a fast review of this book. It feels a little fast based on the fact that it's 440 pages of just pure charts and graphs and involved pictures. And it's an amazing book. Old or not, 7 years old, I don't know if you call that old. In this day and age, it sort of feels a little old, but it's not. All of this information still applies. There is updated information. Like I said, you can look it up online. Pete's always putting out new stuff, and then you can buy a couple more books out there that hopefully I'll be able to review pretty soon for you guys. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. Book number 2. Again, I'll link number 1 down below. And we'll see you guys again really soon. Thanks for watching.